Okay, I'll send out a little more social media while you guys go ahead and get started. Neeraj and Elizabeth, do you want to do the introduction for Neeraj here, and then we can hand it off to him?
Yeah, so hi everyone, welcome to our meetup session. Basically, we have these meetup sessions every month, and we are basically here to connect more and talk more about SAFE, and also just to be on the lookout and just to answer questions on people who are either new to SAFE, and also maybe just new things that we get to learn as we go forth. So today our guest speaker is Neeraj. He is the CEO of Responsive Bee. So we are really happy and grateful to have him on board on this session. So without wasting time, I'll have him introduce himself, and from there, I guess we can now start. And of course, we have John Okoro, our CEO, the CEO of Auspicious Agile and Blockchain. So welcome everyone. Feel free to ask questions, and let's have an amazing session.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth, for the introduction. And thank you, John, for hosting this amazing meetup. Just like you mentioned and Elizabeth mentioned, we are hoping to have more such meetups in the future and more frequently as well. So, look out for, invitations and notifications from John and Elizabeth, everyone. Thank you. I'll start sharing my screen. And today I'm going to talk about my journey with the Finacle, that's world's largest banking software. But first thing first, let me introduce myself briefly again. My name is Neeraj Bachani. Fortunate to be a SAFE program consultant trainer. Very few people in the world are currently holding this title. And again, like I said, fortunate to be holding this. And more than 22 years in the IT industry. Started somewhere back in 2009 as a Scrum Master, but then moved on to play roles like team coach, program coach, and eventually enterprise agile coach early in 2013, 2014. In 2014, again, fortunately, I got an opportunity to transform Philips Healthcare. When I say transform, it is not just transformation in the process, but also transformation in terms of bringing in new tools and new technology for them. That was the starting journey in Scaled Agile Framework, SAFE. And then post that, got a chance to transform Finacle, that's world's largest banking software. And today's journey is going to be a very brief summary of what we did, how we did, what was the approach, and of course the end results for this transformation journey. Sorry, if somebody is not speaking, can I ask the person to be on mute?
Let me see who we have talking there. Hold on a second.
Yeah.
I think we're good. Yep.
Thank you. And post Finacle, this journey was in 2015 to 2018. Post Finacle, again, I got opportunities to work for organizations like Harman, Intel, NXP, RSA. All these organizations also underwent Agile and Scale Agile, specifically SAFE transformation. So that's a quick, brief introduction about me. And talking again about Finacle, now Finacle, like I said, is the world's largest banking software, which means, roughly world's 16-17% of the people actually use application systems and products backed up by Finacle. And this is being used by a lot of banks, a lot of financial institutions across 84 countries. And of course, as I speak, this number will keep changing because this is a little older data. But of course, as and when people start utilizing the financial services of different institutes and banks across the world, they'll get to see more Finacle working in that local context. And which means, some example of financial institutions and banks, as you can see out here, backed by Finacle, powered by Finacle. DBS, Goldman Sachs, and then, a lot of banks like Payments Bank, National Trust Bank, even Emirates, NBD, all these are backed by Finacle out there. Right. So again, Finacle as a product was under Infosys, but Infosys moved Finacle under a separate product entity called Edgeworth Systems, and we coaches, the transformation journey was actually being done for Edgeworth, and you can find this case study also on scaledagileFramework.com. If you go and type Edgeworth, you can see the case study shown up out there. Okay, so let me jump into the safe journey that we had. And like I said, you can find Edgeworth on Scale Agile. But let me go back around 6-7 years ago. The scenario was that Finacle already was a leading bank solution provider across the world. But it was doing great in the context that it was operating. And when I say the context, there were certain financial institutions, certain banks that got their features probably in 6 months, 8 months, 10 months. But as we know, in today's context, in today's dynamically changing market, you possibly cannot survive with the releases and deliveries of the features going out in 8 to 10 months or even a year. And especially, in a lot of countries, the government makes sure that the financial institutions are secure for people, and they also start bringing in more stringent rules, more stringent policies, and obviously, not only the banks, even the solution provider to the banks have to abide by those changes in policies and rules, right? And imagine, the government coming and saying, hey, there is a certain restriction. You cannot put the customer's credit card details on the website. As a bank, you possibly cannot go back and say, yeah, this is a great change. This is a great feature, government, but we'll come back to you after 10 months, right? So you are wiped off, you are finished. And that is what exactly started happening with Finacle. It was doing so well till that point, but interestingly, what had happened was the then CEO, his name was Michael Ray. He consulted a big consulting firm just to see how the organization and the product was doing. And to his surprise, the consultant mentioned that if Finacle doesn't change its internal processes or the way Finacle is getting built, you possibly do not have a chance beyond 3 to 4 years. That was the kind of statement the consultant made, right? And the CEO obviously got a little worried, little anxious as to how do we bring in a change. And that is where the thought of bringing in Agile, and especially with the size of Finacle, which has roughly 7,000 to 8,000 people, the Scaled Agile or the related frameworks were also being considered, right? And again, the challenges that surfaced through that consultant was the releases were going out, like I said, in an year, 10 months to a year. But not only that, even the changing priorities were not managed well, which means, even if a particular financial institution or a bank needs a feature urgently, the overall time to market was pretty high, right? And the management was also struggling with some kind of a predictability, because your commitments, the management's commitments, are based on those predictabilities. And not to mention, the quality was not that great. And there were so many that I can go on and on and on. And I'm sure, you all must be able to now correlate, because most of the organizations typically face same or similar challenges that I'm mentioning out here. Right. So this was the starting point, why Scale Agile Framework was being considered. And we all know that the only thing that is constant is change, which means, any organization, be it a leader that has been operating for the last 10 or 20 years, always needs to bring in some kind of a change to cope up with the market changes, with the technology changes, with the changes in the government laws, so on and so forth. Right. So all this was happening in Finacle, and that is where The choice, like I said, was Scaled Agile Framework for a couple of reasons. Uh, Number one reason, of course, SAFe was starting to pick up very well around that time. I'm talking 2015. That is where the choice of such a framework was being considered. Second, a lot of banks, a lot of financial institutions had already started to implement Scale Agile Framework, and that is where the outcomes, the results, which were being shown as very favorable, very positive, at least for the banking industry. Finacle got the attention of SAFe that way as well. That it's already working for some of the banks. And why SAFe? Because the overall objective was not just to improve one or two teams or one or two products. The entire Finacle, the entire organization had to bring in something called as business agility, which means the entire organization is being responsive and not only a couple of teams or a couple of people or even a certain product. Entirely the Finacle, which is a huge product, had to be shown as a responsive one. Now, this is where the CEO mentioned, why are we bringing in SAFe? Because ability to respond to any business changes in a more effective way. But at the same time, there was also a person joined in from Israel, Dr. Ronan Bernahor, who became the head of Agile Business Transformation. And he made an interesting statement that our mission is not just to adopt agile mindset and practices, but also together become like a learning organization for continuous improvement of value delivery. It is not a small change, it is not a one time change. It has to be brought in as a cultural change for many more years to come. And that's the reason the name of this transformation was kept as Mac 1, just to highlight the importance of speed. And when I say speed, it's not just bringing in any kind of practices, but to bring in a practices that are sustainable so that the organization shows a lot of responsiveness towards the changes in the market. Like I said, that is becoming more competitive day by day. Right. So this was the background why Finacle chose SAFe. And now let's look at the kind of approach that was taken for Finacle, and specifically, why the SAFe approach really worked for Finacle. Let's discuss that as well. This is where SAFe is beautifully defining something called as an implementation roadmap. Now, why implementation roadmap? Because transformation is not just a very small change. Transformation is a big change across the organization, and step-by-step approach of such a transformation obviously keeps people motivated. You definitely have some kind of a plan in front of the management, in front of the people and the teams. And at each step, you start taking a feedback to make sure that you are going in the right direction. And if something needs to be changed, that can definitely be considered in the next step. Right. So starting there, when Finacle decided to go SAFe, the very first activity, which is also important in any transformation journey, not just the process changes, the first step definitely is to get the management skin in the game. Unless management doesn't support, unless management doesn't get involved, there is hardly a chance that such a transformation will ever succeed. And that is what exactly happened. The management, the entire gamut of C-suite leaders for Finacle got involved. They first had to understand why do we need this transformation change and what are the next steps that we need to look at to bring in this change of magnitude around so many people. And the next came is the Mac 1 team, where fortunately, I was the first coach to join in, along with Dr. Ronan Bernahor, head of transformation journey that I mentioned. And we also had involvement of a associate vice president who was a leader in the organization, and we needed his influence to make sure such a change is there sustainable as culture across the organization. And of course, the team was created, more agile coaches were added. And not only that, we also had certain people who were experts in tools, certain people who were experts in Scrum Master, so on and so forth. And the entire Mac 1 team as a guiding coalition was created. Right. And obviously, the next steps would also be then to train the leaders, identify, what kind of, trainings are needed. How do we create an implementation plan? And then, get ready for the first launch of Agile Release Train. Now, those of you who have been part of SAFE would know that the Agile Release Train is that team of Agile teams that comes together. But those of you who are new to SAFE would know that whenever you are scaling, the first thing definitely you need to scale apart from scope, apart from the backlog, is the number of people that are required to deliver that product. And that is where the first Agile Release Train makes sure that the entire organization embarks on that journey of scaling. Right. So the first art was identified. That was the platform Agile Release Train, because the platform of Finacle is something that was facing a lot of challenges, a lot of issues. And from there, some of the practices, even for the management, for the portfolio, were also created. Now, the whole idea of involving management was that they should not just be standing besides the fence and allow teams to become agile. They should also practice what they are preaching. And that's the reason some of the practices for the portfolio. So, for example, the portfolio backlog, the portfolio Kanban, prioritization of the portfolio backlog, these basic practices were introduced early on to make sure that the management themselves also get involved in this transformation journey. Right. So the entire implementation roadmap was taken up as the guiding factor because the whole intention was to transform Finacle. And eventually I'll talk about the results. But one of the biggest advantages Finacle got was the transformation had art launches every 1.5 months approximately. Right. And we'll discuss more about what is meant by an art launch and how did we do that. Right. So just like we have the Agile Manifesto, and I'm sure everybody out here has seen the Agile Manifesto. Similarly, a manifesto for business agility was created for Finacle because the whole intention of this transformation journey was twofold. One, people should know the purpose why we are doing and obviously get involved. And at the same time, the management, the customers also get to feel the advantage of using such a framework. Right. And that is where the manifesto for business agility was created, which means you can see the ones on the left hand side were given more preference. For example, effectiveness in building the right thing was given more preference over efficiency. Whereas, the earlier traditional model that Finacle was using may have been emphasizing more on the efficiency. Similarly, optimizing flow of value to make sure the releases are going out faster in the market was given more importance than just the local optimization or a team level optimization. Thinking the entire product in terms of features was given more preference over something releasing quickly, as a release. And finally, predictability, making sure that the management, the customers know how much of the features can we expect every quarter. That was given more preference over just the visibility. Right. So while we are making sure the ones on the left hand side have value, but we are not ignoring the ones on the right hand side. They are still there, just that the left ones get more preference as compared to the right one. Right. And this further led us to something interesting called as a transformation manifesto. Now, the previous slide was more as an organization to know what are some things that need to be preferred. The transformation manifesto was more for the Mac 1 team and the agile coaches to let them know what is to be given more preference and importance as compared to the other. And that is where, interestingly, we had something called as a hybrid model, which means we are not just targeting teams, we are making sure that we target managers towards this transformation first. Now, why managers? Because traditionally, the teams in Finacle were always being influenced by the managers, and suddenly taking the managers out of the equation just because we are bringing in agile and scale agile did not make sense. So that's why our focus was to make sure the managers also have a transformative mindset. The managers become more like coaches rather than just being managing people and the system. And of course, honestly speaking, we did face resistance, but eventually, when managers realized that this is the benefit it's going to get for the entire organization, that's where they slowly started to change the mindset as well. That was point number one for the transformation team. The second point, of course, was to look at Shuhari. Now, Shuhari means you start with something that is already defined. Ha means you try and break the rules once you have started to reach maturity. And re means you redefine your rules. And that's where the entire Mac1 team had this in mind, that we will go as per the safe implementation roadmap. We are not going to bring in changes early on. But yes, over a period of time, as team matures, we will try and bring in more customized practices. That was point number two for us. The third, very important, was always look at iterative and incremental changes and believe in outcome based coaching. We are not here in the business of just telling people what to do. We were in the business of making sure that people find solutions to their own problems through effective coaching. And finally, inspect and adapt. Since everything is not known at the beginning, at regular intervals, we took a feedback, we did some retrospectives to make sure that we are continuously evolving, we are continuously using empiricism to come out with the best possible practices for the entire Finacle team. Right. So this was the transformation manifesto that we followed as Mac1 team. And finally, out came the set of implementation principles that were widely circulated in the organization. And you can see, some of the points that are already discussed in the previous slide are all shown out here. But the house of lean approach that we took was to identify what is the goal that we are trying to put forward in front of Finacle, people, management, and even the customers. And as you can clearly see, the goal was to make sure that there is a faster value delivery, which was the biggest challenge Finacle was facing, that they were not able to make releases quickly. They were not able to manage those changing priorities. Right. And look at the pillars: outcome-based coaching, holistic approach to change management. Then we spoke about Shuhari. And then interestingly, we used the concepts of flow towards visualization and communication. And finally, based on the facts, based on the data, we took decisions, and the management was also together involved. Now, all this again, just to reiterate, was not possible unless we had the continuous support of the leadership. And like I said, they themselves had to get involved to make sure it's a success all around. Right. So very quickly, I'll talk about the kind of practices that were brought in for each of the pillars that are shown out here. So for example, we brought in for the outcome-based coaching, we brought in the right kind of people, which means right coaches for this transformation journey were selected. Right now, any coach who has good experience in Agile and maybe Scaled Agile, if possible, was the person that was suited for this context. And again, if the coach has experience in the financial industry, that was something like a cherry on the cake. Right. So we got a certain set of people, coaches who can independently work with teams and with agile release trains to make sure they understand the context and then do the coaching accordingly. Second, of course, was the kind of experience learning, which, like I said earlier, collaborate with the managers to understand what kind of situations they have been, and what kind of role models can they become for the teams. The third thing we brought in was look at bringing in more of pull rather than push, which means, earlier when the managers were working in the traditional model, they would just go ahead and put the scope in front of the teams. Whereas the new model that we were suggesting to the teams was pick up based on the available capacity that you have, and make sure you do not chew more than what you can bite. So make sure whatever you are picking up, try and deliver that and set your tone for predictabilities. And then finally, consistency across all the agile release trains, by making sure the same coach is doing the trainings for all the teams, the same coach is working across the entire agile release train to make sure there are no differences in the terminologies and the understanding the coach builds along with the team. Right. And finally, the focus was, first of all, to make sure time to market gets reduced. Whereas, the teams were focused on making sure the cycle time and the lead time for the features are starting to reduce. Because eventually, if you do that at the team level, obviously at the organization level, you can see faster time to market and better releases, quicker releases, as compared to the previous traditional model that was being used. So this was pillar number one, outcome-based coaching that was used. And moving on to the second pillar, where the focus was holistic change to approach, where we brought in this model where we said, hey, the 6-step approach makes sure that we believe in the system of values. We also at the same time bring in practices, processes, and tools that create a lot of alignment, and alignment with not only intra teams, but also alignment with the management and the customers. The third part was very interesting because traditionally, Finacle was always working like silos. And one of the first changes that was brought in at the silo level was to merge both engineering and testing under a single head. Now, again, traditionally, if you know, there has always been a contest between developers and testers. Whereas in the agile world, we wanted to emphasize on the point that it's not developers versus testers, it's always developers and testers. And that's why, the very first step was to make sure both these silos are merged and they feel that togetherness as a single unit. That was the reason why this was done. The fourth step, obviously, to make sure leadership is involved. Leader just doesn't do talk the talk. Leaders always do walk the talk. And they also put in their skin in the game by attending all events that were happening at the art level. So, for example, PI planning, making sure leaders attend that, inspect and adapt, leaders attend, and during the demos as well, the leaders are out there. And finally, focus on the transformation, focus on the value delivery, but at the same time, keep that sense of urgency very high by management repeatedly sending out communication and saying, we are not done with this transformation yet. We are always on this journey of improvement, and that's a never ending journey for all of us. So that's the kind of an holistic approach to change was adopted, which, like I said, pertains to the Shuhari principle. Again, this is a Japanese term where, like I said, they believe in making sure you start with the practices that are already in place. And that's what we also did. We started training people and leaders across the various agile release trains so that everybody knows what is SAFe all about, what is the kind of responsibilities and roles that are required, so on and so forth. And then eventually learning from each other, making sure, practices are customized or contextualized. And then looking at, making sure that some of those deltas, some of those changes are brought in at each art level so that it suits that particular art better. So this was the Shuhari model that was brought in. And for example, as you can see in the remodel, there was something called as a safe ban, which is actually a combination of safe and Kanban. Just like you have the combination of Scrum and Kanban called as Scrumban, SafeBan at that level, at the art level, was brought in so that teams can use the power of both Kanban, Scrum, as well as Safe together in a single PI. And number 4 pillar talks more about visualization and communication, making sure the transparency, at least in terms of the product and the backlogs, transparency in terms of processes, transparencies in terms of the feedback was always visible to one and all. Right, the whole idea of bringing in agile and scale agile at that point also was because it's such a huge organization with so many levels and so many different kinds of products running under Finacle. There needs to be a constant visibility to make sure people learn from each other, but do not then hesitate to also admit the mistakes and make changes accordingly. And at the same time, communication was done repeatedly from the CEO level to the management level to make sure that transformation doesn't get diluted. And the transformation is not just the only thing that is happening in the organization. There are so many other changes that are also being brought in. And again, communication makes people remind that this is the journey that we are already on to that. So visualization and communication was given its due importance to make sure people really understand the importance of it. And finally, the interesting part is the learning that is not just based on somebody's perception. The learning is always coming through data, which means again and again using the right kind of matrices at all levels. For example, the management was worried about time to market, predictability, and quality. And at the same time, the coaches from Mac1 were making sure that all the agile release trains and all the teams were using relevant matrices connected to these three. So for example, the time to market, like I mentioned earlier, was brought down at the team level in terms of cycle time and lead time and throughputs to make sure that they control these at the team level, and eventually it benefits the entire organization. And similarly, predictability, management was worried about predictability. Teams were given the matrices, which is called as a say-do ratio. Whatever is being planned versus how much are you delivering, teams can really observe and control that. And that is what the intention of using the data-driven learning was always taken. So which means with a size of 7,000, 8,000 people across Finacle, you need to bring in a tool that first of all brings in such kind of a data and its visibility. And that is why the tool that was chosen was IBM RTC, Rational Team Consult. And you can see, certain customizations were done in the kind of matrices and reportings that IBM RTC gives out. So for example, management was more worried about predictabilities and time to market. That's where, we brought out the backlog readiness metric, prediction. Now, again, prediction can be done in 3 ways. Are we on time? Which means even if you are not on time, how much can we deliver in that time available? Versus if we really need to deliver something as the scope that is being defined, how much more time do we need, or are we on track for this? And what are the kind of risks involved? So these are some interesting changes that were brought in at the organization level, at the management level, to make sure they can make the right decisions at that point in time. And again, the flow part, talking about cumulative flow diagrams, control charts, average cycle times, all these were being used specially by managers and product managers to make sure they can take the right decisions at the right level. Right. And similarly, the teams were also looking at the matrices at their level. For example, in terms of backlog readiness, are we really ready to get into the PI planning or even into the iteration planning? Do we have the right backlog ready with us? Similarly, what is the kind of quality that we are delivering for features, for various user stories? Do we have the right size features and user stories? So on and so forth. Right. So all these together, changes in data, changes in matrices at management level and team level, made sure they are always in alignment. Right. And finally, last not the least, like I mentioned earlier, it is not possible unless the management supports, which means, the leadership support was always there as the foundation towards this change. Right. Not only their involvement, not only the kind of alignment, but teams were looking towards the management also to support whenever there are any impediments or issues. And we expected the leaders to step in, make sure those issues or impediments are resolved, because leaders are the best people to make changes to any system. Right. So this was the journey that we took entirely for Finacle, but doesn't make sense unless I tell you what was the kind of results that were achieved in the 2.5, 3 years journey where I was part of the transformation journey for Finacle. So of course, the results were tremendous. Within the first year itself, Finacle had 8 agile release trains launched, ranging from a size of 60 people to even 125 people. Those were the kind of agile release trains that were launched in the very first year itself. And then, close to 800 people trained. In fact, 3 development value streams were fully operational, which means the entire set of people in those 3 value streams had transformed themselves into safe ways of working. Arts were launched, arts were even integrated as solutions. All that happened within those 3 operational value streams. Although Finacle is huge, they had around 10 development value streams that were supposed to be transformed, and they had done only 3 in one year. So the journey was still going on. And like I mentioned earlier, art launch every 1.5 months, roughly 6 weeks. What were some of the other results that were achieved now based on the surveys that were done PI on PI? People found that this is a much better way of working as compared to the traditional ways of working. And even the ENPS, Employer Net Promoter Score, which talks about whether people are really promoting safe or not, also shot up. Shows that people are highly motivated, highly satisfied working in such a framework. That was obviously the number one result or the benefit that was reported. And looking at the original challenges, what Finacle had mentioned earlier. So, for example, the time to market was pretty high at that time. That was brought down by roughly 50%, which means features that earlier took close to 10 months to get delivered were brought down to roughly 4.5, 5 months, which is a big change considering the volume and the complexity of Finacle. Right. And look at the business context understanding in terms of people understanding what is real value to the customer. And even the change can be managed better after the survey was done for roughly 350 people after 1 year. In terms of business flexibilities, the cadence of planning and releases was brought down to 10 weeks, which is roughly 2.5 months. And at the same time, look at the improved visibility of what they need to do, and enhancing the visibility of release status went up by more than 80%. Similarly, the feature speed in which you develop the feature quickly, the cycle time reduced by more than 50%. All of because there was a flow stream that was created across Finacle. And you can see, improve and trust also shot up. Resolving conflicts and disagreements effectively also shot up by more than 80%. So these were some great benefits that was reported. And from the management and the customer perspective, even this brought in the cost per feature down by 8%. I know that's not a huge change in terms of costing, but yes, they are slowly improvising. They started with 8% PI on PI, and over a period of time, this improved drastically. But not to mention the throughput or the productivity, there was an increase of 73%, which means people are spending their time to deliver something more valuable that is being used by the customers, and they are not doing wasteful activities. So that is how productivity was defined. And talking about quality quickly, as a last metric, but a very important one, the quality of the new features that were being built improved by a huge 40%, which means less of rework, higher satisfaction for the customers, and maybe repeat businesses. And at the same time, even the defects that are escaping to the customers got reduced by 90%, which means less than 5 defects every PI that was reported after 1.5 years of the transformation journey. Right. And I would like to also quickly show you that's the last slide for this presentation. What was the reaction of the leaders? Did they find this beneficial, or was it just the teams that showed great interest in Scaled Agile Framework? And look at some of the leaders making statements like this is one of the smoothest deliveries that we have ever done, right? And he's talking about the entire Finacle journey, because this gentleman was there for the last 25-30 years in Finacle, and he's making the statement that this is one of the smoothest journey that he has seen. Similarly, flawless execution, and the head of engineering is also saying, that one decision to commit to the spirit of agility was the key, with the practices. So this is what was the entire journey of Finacle, and I would like to halt here, not before looking at any questions that you might have, or any other information that you feel should have been part of this transformation journey to be shown.
Yeah, I think this has been a really nice session, and we have gotten to learn so much on how Finacle is related to SAFe, and how it's applied in a company. So I'll leave it to Aether. Let's start by maybe just a few introductions on where some guys are joining us from. So I think maybe Brian, you can say hi to guys here. Brian, are you there? Yeah, and just let us know where you're joining from.
Hi everyone. My name is Brian. I'm joining from Kenya. Thank you. I have learned a lot, and I appreciate.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. The next person, Daisy, maybe you can just tell us where you're joining from. Daisy, are you there? I think she's still on mute. So Sujay had said you're very new to SAFe. Maybe you have any questions or comments that you may want maybe Neeraj to maybe be brief on, or maybe just walk you through. Just feel free to maybe comment on what you thought about the session. And, in case you have any questions, kindly, you're free to ask a question. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Neeraj. It was a great session altogether. It was pretty eye-opening for me because I'm very new to SAFe. I had this one question, right? Where or what type of work environment is SAFe most applicable for? Is it only for software development, or have you seen SAFe being applied for other types of projects other than software development as the whole?
Yeah, so great question, Sujay. And first of all, thank you for joining in. Yeah, you're right. See, SAFe has been prevalently used across software industry, But now, looking at the changing dynamics of the market and, the overall world as well, I would say, SAFe is now being applied even to combinations of software and hardware. I've personally worked in an automobile environment where SAFe was used for an hardware, just pure hardware, right? And the word is that, a lot of organizations, non-IT, for example, LG, Bosch, all these have now started to adopt SAFe, because remember, the scaling principles remain the same irrespective of the technology or the domain. So a lot of these organizations have now started to use, and no wonders, you'll see probably in the next year, maybe organizations that are working in machine language, or maybe big data, or maybe even artificial intelligence, you'll see SAFe being adopted there as well, Sujay. Software is just the base to start with. Right.
Understand. Yeah, it's often easy to get the things introduced in software compared to other domains, but yeah, uh, potentially if you have the value out of it, I think even the hardware companies do adapt. I think. And one more thing is, you often mentioned about how important it is to have higher management or the top level management support to get the SAFe implemented. So is this on the whole a top down approach, or does this work from proposing this to the management and realizing the value on how or what values do you think should be highlighted to top management so that they do consider this kind of thing, maybe not on the full scale but at least to begin with, because it
Yeah.
is never perfect system. We just have to tune in every day according to the change in the need from customers and clients, so on. Yeah.
Definitely. Definitely. Yeah, you're absolutely right. See, transformation always starts from top to bottom, because it's the management, like I said, they need to bring in changes into the system, isn't it? They are the people who are managing the system. Now, any change that needs to be brought in obviously can be recommended by the teams, to start with, say, let's start with Scrum, let's start using Kanban. All these changes are suggested, but unless the management doesn't buy in with that change, transformation hardly can be initiated or can be successful, right? So
Yeah,
obviously it's a
that's right.
dual game. Somebody recommends, management has to take note why this is better and how it will benefit the entire organization, not just one team, and then they go ahead and give the approval, and then it comes down as a change from top to bottom. But remember, Sujoy, transformation always is organic, which means the teams have to transform and show that it's working. And then it
Yes.
goes up, which is also shown in the roadmap, right?
Yeah.
But initiation is always top to bottom. You're absolutely right that way.
Okay. Thank you, Neeraj. That's it
Thank
I
you.
had. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Sujoy.
Yeah, so I think that's nice. Sujay, is that all, or you have anything else?
Neeraj, I was curious actually. Is that transformation
Yeah.
still in progress, or is it completed already? Or is it still in progress?
The presentation is out, so we are on the Q&A session.
Oh no, Elizabeth, I was asking Neeraj a question.
Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I was asking, is that
Yeah.
transformation still in progress, or is it completed, or is it still in progress, or where is it currently?
Still in progress. Still in progress. See, what has happened, John, interestingly, is that, Finacle is just one of the verticals Edgeverve had. There are two more verticals, one is around the R&D products that they do, and the second is around the services that they provide. Right. So now I have the news that, both these verticals have also started to adopt SAFe, because, whatever journey Finacle saw, they have the learnings from there. So it's being applied to the other verticals as well inside the organization. So still going on.
Very good. Right. Okay, Elizabeth, I think unless there are more questions, we can round it out. I think a pretty good session for the last one of the year. I know a lot of people have headed out for holidays already, but a good session. We'll have the recording coming up as well, so that'll be available for everybody. Somebody joining in here. So we'll have the recording available for everybody. We'll have it posted on the MeetUp site and a few other places, so it's available. You have Rajesh here. Maybe Elizabeth, you want to check if he has any questions and introduce him any as well.
Hi, Rajesh. Welcome.
Hi, hi Elizabeth. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So I think you've joined in a bit late. Maybe you can just let us know if you have any questions about how Pinnacle is related with SAFE, or any questions about Scaled Agile Framework. And maybe just you can introduce yourself and tell us where you're joining from, please.
Myself, Rajesh Soguru, Chief Executive Officer of Digital Disruption Private Limited, and we have our startup in Singapore, UK, and in India. And I did like several SAFE certifications by believing on the business agility and business transformations. Definitely, there must be transformation has to happen from the waterfall to the agility. And just to be honest, I'm not much aware of the topic of today to ask more questions on, but very safe specific. I would like to understand in the financial services and banking sector, how mature is the safe implementation, and what are the use cases and at clients those are in the state of implementing safe, specific to the capital markets and of course like some of the financial services.
Yeah. Yeah, great, Rajesh. First of all, thank you for joining in. I know you missed the Finacle part. I discussed about how Finacle adopted the safe journey. That was 2015 to 2018. But I think you have rightly caught the point that the entire financial world has almost moved to Scale Agile framework now, and it all starts typically when a few banks started first with so for example Deutsche Bank, RBS, they all started with this journey, and from there it became prevalent across the financial and the banking world, the BFSI, what is typically known as, right? If you go to scaleagileframework.com, if you select customer stories and you select financial typically, you'll see a lot of organizations, including even insurance, organizations like North Western Mutual, they have also adopted SAFE because the kind of products that they build generally are around software, and scaling is the need of the hour in today's context. That's why this framing is getting applied to these organizations and specifically to the entire domain of financial world pretty prevalently, I would say, Rajesh.
Thanks, Neeraj. And one more
Yeah.
question that I have is, yes, obviously, as you said, it's a need of hour for the any sector to adopt the scaling because of the business nature and customer expectations and on demand and
True.
so on.
True.
And at the same time, how can startups can be value add in the safe journey? Because usually it's a scaled. And at the same time, I would like to understand as a consulting services in this
Right.
complete safe roadmap, where all startups can focus and build their center of excellences
True.
to be value add to the safe and to build their practice at the safe. I mean, like in the safe grounds, actually.
True, true. Absolutely. See, even the startups nowadays have started to look at Scale Agile framework because, see, one of the recommendations we always make around scaling is that you don't need to pick up everything entirely in one go. You can also start implementing certain practices, taking it element by element or, piece by piece. And that's where safe has multiple configurations, and we say, guys, pick up something that you really need to start scaling with. So for example, just to give you an example, Rajesh, even in Finacle there was a very small team of R&D, and safe says the agile release train should be 50 people, but that R&D team was around 35-40 people, right? And we picked up certain practices. For example, we had a brief PI planning instead of 2-day PI planning. We had a shorter PI instead of the big PI. And we said, hey, right now, some of these practices are more applicable to you. Use them, see the benefit. And then once you scale, then only you bring in the other relevant practices. And I think the same can be said very confidently about startups. We have worked with startups as well. Startups also exactly work the same way. You pick up what is needed, you see the benefit that is coming out of it, use inspect and adapt, use Shuhari, and then bring in other practices as and when required. That's what we have seen working even with startups, Rajesh. And SAFE is technology domain agnostic. You don't need to worry about which technology, which domain does it really apply to. I mean, if you look at the customer stories, I think the entire world for different domains has now already started to use SAFE in their context. So it works pretty easily everywhere, although transformation itself is a challenging journey. It's not going to be something as an overnight change, Rajesh.
Thanks, Neeraj.
It
And
answers,
one more quick question.
Sure.
So as you said, like, of course, yeah, scale required at least 50 to 120 plus team members to deliver because it's obviously running the train, not a bus.
True.
And at the same time, when we try to pitch to the clients to see, to test the water levels, what sort of pilot projects that we can recommend to the clients? Because engaging 50 consultants or 50 of their employees for some transformation reasons without looking at what's the value that they are going to reap or derive, it's
True.
quite difficult to convince them. And at least if they want to
Yes.
test the water levels and want to go for the pilot projects, and
Yeah.
what's the best approach or best practice that SAFE recommends?
Yeah. So see, 2 points to your question, Rajesh. See, one is, see, customers today nowadays understand what are the benefits of lean, agile, and DevOps, right? And what we are saying in SAFE is it's using the power of these three at a scaled level. Now, scaling, like I said, can be defined. 40 is also scaling, 50 is also scaling. We can define that scaling. That's number one pitch point that we generally do it for customers. Second, what kind of programs should be really picked up? Now, multiple choices. For example, if you have programs that are of high value, high risk, personally speaking, that's a good choice for me. But I know a lot of times organizations don't want to take the risk. So what they do is initially they might target high value, low risk kind of programs. Now, what I would typically recommend as a consultant is, and again, it's for a group of consultants if you have, identify which quadrant your programs are falling into and which one of them need to get transformation first. Personally, high value, high risk, but even if you're okay with high value, low risk, go for those programs first. Because then at least the customers can see change in the value. If they are not getting value quicker, any of these agile, lean, scale agile practices will help get value faster and better. Right? And then you customize your practices accordingly. Don't select low value, low risk kind of programs because you cannot make too many improvements in such a program. It's not going to be worth it. Right? And nobody would like to even look at, low value, high risk. It's out of question. You never target value is low and risk is high. You don't need to probably even look at transformation initially for that. So my recommendation is to generically look at it, but obviously other things can be known only when we have the context and the details around it, Rajesh. That's a very generic answer I gave.
Yeah, that's interesting, Neeraj. And yeah, if anyone have questions, I will pause it here. Otherwise, I can continue asking actually. Let me see.
It's actually
Because I want to give chance to everyone.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
go
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah, so my next question is about the budget allocation. So usually like SAFE recommends the participatory budget, right? So in case if we want to pitch into the clients in the middle of the year, and definitely it's the transformation is not going to happen within 1 year itself because of the regulatory needs and accounting system that they have in place. And obviously, as we are talking about scaled, it's like linked with billions of dollars or millions at least. So in this context, how do we propose to the management that they can try with the participatory budget in the middle of the year?
True. See, remember, participatory budgeting, if you look closely, first of all, on the SAFE implementation roadmap, participatory budgeting comes quite late, right? Even in the roadmap, it comes when you have multiple value streams and agile release streams launched. Why? Because participatory budgeting needs two things. One, it needs to have some kind of a predictability mechanism for the value streams and arts that you are running. You need to have PIs. And second, you need to have feedback for the ROI based on which you will take a decision of adjust those budgeting. Right. So participatory budgeting is something I personally recommend only when the organization has reached some kind of a maturity state. But initially, if you want to try out some kind of a budgeting option, try looking at, putting your scope through story points, maybe coming out with cost per PI, and then, making changes to the budget on PIs, not participatory budgeting, changes on PI. So for example, if the cost is too high, ROI is low, try adjusting the PI size or the art size. Those are some of the starting steps I would recommend for the portfolio. Participatory budgeting is something which mature organizations will do, Rajesh. And I'll be honest, Finacle did not even get participatory budgeting after 2.5, 3 years of transformation journey. Because, finance doesn't immediately agree to this change, saying, yeah, let's do it just because safe says so. Finance has been working with their models for last 20 years. They will not change suddenly. But yes, the first steps are to look at cost per PI, story point cost, if you can come out with predictabilities. All those are starting points that you can possibly look at in this direction. And I mean, others can add, John, you can add something different if you feel can be done in this context. It's a mutual overall learning, we believe. I hope that answers, Rajesh.
Yeah, Neeraj. And my only question is like the maturity of the organization, how does it possible without having budget allocated to that particular initiation in the organization? Because if the organization is already in that direction of implementing their value streams in the agility, whatever methodology or the adopting their framework, agility frameworks, then it is easy to scale it to the running the trains actually.
Correct.
And in this case, like let's say if they are into the purely into the waterfall, or sometimes most of the banks, especially financial services, when I look at, though they are keep saying it is agile methodology that they are using for the delivery, they usually go for the mini waterfalls because of the dependency and kind of like nature of the deliverables. They are still failing to understand or like adopting the full-fledged agile methodologies for the deliveries.
Right.
So in this context, if let's say any legacy banks, if they are not keen to like transform into the agile and kind of not able to understand the benefits of the scaled agile, how can this budget can move from the traditional cost centers to the value streams or like investing on the value add actually?
True. I totally agree, because changing the organization structure just to have value streams is probably the most difficult thing to do. Breaking down something that has been working so far, and now we go back and say, guys, break down everything and create value streams. I know most difficult thing to do. The recommendation in that case is at least let there be silos right now. At least can we have people coming together for a version of the product, be together and deliver value to the customer. I mean, reporting still is to the silos. Budgeting still happens as a cost center, like you rightly mentioned. But then can we have people borrowed from these silos come together like an agile release train and deliver value? See, even with the number of hours and days that they are working for that product, cost center can always know, hey, this person worked for 25 into 3, 75 days in this PI. This is the costing. Now, whatever is the ROI, accordingly get the costing and profit for that cost center. Isn't it? So that's a workaround. But, the mindset change that we always recommend is, can the organization move from such siloed, such project structure to more of product structure? I mean, if you see products, they don't have silos. They have products only, product lines, which we call as value streams in SAFe. It's synonymous that way. But the problem with these services now, suddenly they will not break down their silos just because SAFe says so. But can they at least try it out and see whether this structure of getting people on hire, we would say hire, for a PI or for two PIs and see whether that's working or not. Because remember, finance is the last thing any organization would touch, isn't it? I mean, typically, if I'm an insurance agent, I come and say, "Can you start investing right away?" You're the person who would say, "No, sorry, hold on. I already have my investment plans. Why should I disturb them and listen to you?" So finance is very touchy area, very sensitive area. Organizations will not initially or immediately move, Rajesh. You will have to have these workarounds till you are in the value streams and arts and PIs kind of a structure. That's what I have seen, at least in service organizations, because they're not yet in the product mindset.
That's true, Neeraj. So it's a highest, I mean, that's the biggest challenge that we face, especially in the service industry, because the
Yes.
product development wise, or product based companies, they can derive the value immediately when they can see the ROIs within the short span
Absolutely.
of time. But services,
Absolutely.
it's quite difficult to even like justify in terms of ROIs by
Yeah.
adopting these SAFe is like biggest challenge at this point in time.
You are right. You're right. And I've seen that personally. See, that's where you were mentioning organizations sometimes tend to become waterfall or agile in waterfall or waterfall in agile. We call this at scrum fall. You are implementing scrum like a waterfall. So all
Yeah,
these
it's
are
like a
the
hybrid
reasons.
most of the times.
It's like a hybrid. But then again, see, at least, they are taking some benefits of lean and agile and scaling. I know the organization structure is restricting them. I'm sure they know that, right? It's the only thing that, is possibly in the middle of delivering value faster versus, what was traditional. So they will have to use this hybrid approach until they can make organizational changes. And, it doesn't work, full-fledgedly. Hybrid means partially. So that's my opinion, that it's not going to be easy for service organizations to adopt to it immediately, Rajesh.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
And one more quick question.
Sure.
So what level of management is the best place? I mean, of course, it is subjective. And based on
Yeah.
your experience, is that like portfolio managers is the best stakeholders to approach with these ideas, or the senior
Yeah.
management? Because it's always like as an initial step, we cannot convince the senior management to enter into the participatory budget and quarterly
True.
budgets. So if portfolio manager can convince to
Convince.
transfer some of their cost center
Yeah.
value to build these value streams, that will be great help, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
is that the recommended way of
Approach.
approaching, or?
Definitely. Definitely see your business unit works like a portfolio. Correct. I'm talking specifically now service industry. So your business unit works like a portfolio, which means if there is a portfolio manager or in service industries, typically, if you see, your VPs and your directors are good influencers. Now, if you can start with that approach and say, guys, can we try it out at least in our business unit, in our portfolio? Chances are that because it's under their control, they can possibly experiment and show benefits to the senior management. And from there, the entire organization can adopt. So yes, you're right. Your portfolio management, your business unit heads, sometimes VPs, these are the best people to approach for any such transformation change, because it requires a change in the structure and sometimes, change in teams and processes. So try from there. It had worked in my scenario in one of the service industries. I'm talking about HCL. So use that if works for you as well. I'm hoping it should.
Thanks, Neeraj.
Okay. Great. Thank
I
you.
don't know, I'm asking too many questions. One last question
No,
before.
they are great, Rajesh. Good questions. Super questions.
Yeah,
I hope
so
we are able to answer them somewhat.
no, it's really impressive. I mean, this is what I've been like struggling to understand or to identify the answers for these questions, and
Yeah.
it's answered most of my questions now.
Yes. Great.
And
Thank you.
your expertise greatly helps.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And one last question from my side related to the collaboration, because as a startup, it is highly difficult for us to convince the financial services or banks, and in fact, gaining the credibility to run their agile scaling transformations is a bit difficult. So is MNCs open for collaboration with the startups to deliver these scaled initiations from their side? And if so, what are the areas where we can focus in this roadmap?
Yeah. See, first of all, see the consulting firms for big MNCs obviously need to show their expertise to MNCs, you know, what MNCs probably might be missing. And typically I have seen is, MNCs look out, first of all, for training and consulting opportunities more to begin with. Now, when I say to begin with, see, internally, MNCs do not have experienced trainers, right? Which is one area which can be showcased to say, hey, we have got trainers who are experienced in implementation. So obviously, they can come and train you the right set of practices and processes. You know, education is the first step, which is important. Now, the second area which a lot of MNCs do open up is, can you guys come over and take up a part of consulting or coaching for maybe say one of the arts, or maybe to start with, you know, few teams inside the art. They may not even have arts, right? So typically I have seen MNCs reach out to organizations who are expertise in this way. First of all, training. Second is implementation. And third areas can be, Rajesh, those are very specific. So for example, tools, for example, setting up Jira for them, maybe, setting up some kind of integrations, DevOps, etc. So all the technical areas are the third areas which organizations do seek, because again, they might not have right set of people to do CI/CD, DevOps pipelines. They may not have the expertise and they might be doing it wrong also. So I think three areas I have seen, organizations do reach out to. And sometimes, outsourcing is not just only for cost. Outsourcing is because the other team or the other organization can do it better than you. So that's the reason MNCs do reach out, Rajesh, in my experience.
Thank you so much, Neeraj. Actually, that's those 3 points really helpful, because most of the times entering into the implementation might be easy by showcasing the subject matter expertise in that particular area, and
Correct.
and obviously, training is another best area to pitch in, of course, because they are lacking in the framework knowledge and kind of understanding as a big picture.
Yes.
And of course, the engineering maturity is something that you already touched in. So that might be another area that we have to look at. And in the similar direction, some question popped up in my mind, and I
understand. Yeah.
I think that's got answered already.
No problem. You can send it to Elizabeth as well. I think, Elizabeth, your email ID is already mentioned in the meetup. So if you have any further questions, not just one, Rajesh, if you have any further questions, please do reach out to Elizabeth as well. Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
I got the Elizabeth side. Thanks a lot, Neeraj. It's really helpful. Great value add.
Thank you for joining in, Rajesh. Thank you. Great questions. Thank you.
Yeah, Rajesh, we always have these meetup sessions in every month. So you can just look out for the January session. So in case you have also any questions that you may want to ask John, or actually Neeraj directly, you can see on the chat we have his LinkedIn address. So you can just, connect with him and maybe get to ask him more. But if you need to learn, of course, more about Scaled Agile Framework, how it works, how it applied in your company, you can always reach out to us. We also offer these courses and training the same way as also Neeraj. And then in case you need to be in a place where you need to, you have some Q&A on specifically Scaled Agile Framework. We have all these sessions that we have every month. We have new speakers, so it's a new experience and a new point of view from each and every one that we have every month. So you can just look out on that on our community, but we really appreciate, actually your questions have been very educative to all of us. And you know, I think maybe we can say, Wendy, maybe you can just say hi, where you're joining from. And also I'll call the second name, MG. She didn't introduce herself. Maybe she can just say where she's joining from as we wind up.
I think she said she was in transit in the comments, Elizabeth, that she wasn't able to go on audio, I think.
Okay. Okay, I think with everything said, if there's anyone else who has a question or a comment, you can just shoot it out as we wind up. We really appreciate Neeraj for a really educative and very nice session. You know, we are going to obviously bring you back here because it has been really educative. Yeah, we really enjoy. So maybe John, you can maybe make some remarks or something.
So Neeraj, excellent session. Really enjoyed it as well. And I think everybody else did. I think obviously end of the year. So hopefully we'll get maybe another time during the kind of the higher season of the year when you can come back and maybe do another as well. I know that we are doing classes with you guys as well. So Elizabeth, you can maybe tell folks about how they can find out about some of the classes and different things that are coming up as well and let people know about that. Does anybody else have any other questions they'd like to ask before we wrap up? There will be a recording made available on the MeetUp site coming up here as well for people to check out. Does anybody else have any questions? Great. Elizabeth, if you want to just maybe give the information on where they can kind of find us, where they can find any information about classes and different things offered by our sponsor as well, and obviously your contact information. And Neeraj, we'll look forward to having you back in upcoming sessions as well, and maybe catching up somewhere around the world here in the States.
Yeah, definitely, John, definitely. Thank you for hosting such a wonderful session, and thanks to Elizabeth as well for all the logistics and arrangement and everything. So invites and all. Thank you, Elizabeth, for that as well. And John, we'll again, schedule something next year, hopefully, with more information around SAFE. We're expecting some changes that might come in SAFE. So maybe that will be an interesting session to everybody to know what are those changes that SAFE is bringing in 2023. So I think that will be an interesting one.
Yep, sounds good. Again, thanks so much. Great session. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. I think, Elizabeth, we can go ahead and close this out here. So thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Have a good
everyone.
day, John.
Thanks, Neeraj. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.